Ja.
Someone's got the echo.
Martin van Harden. Oh. Yeah, that's what I'm doing this.
Oh.
Okay, fesgol ma, chynnu fesgol ma, mi yw'r llaw ma ra. Martin van Harden, good morning everybody and welcome to this meeting of the Comhairle, and it's being conducted through Microsoft Teams platform. And before we begin our meeting, I'll ask Councillor Johnny McKeever to lead us in prayer. Mr. McKeever.
Almighty Father, who doth give the gift of life to all that live, look down on all earth's sin and strife and lift us to a nobler life. Oh, lift up our hearts, O King of Kings, to brighter hopes and kindlier things, to visions of a larger good and holier dreams of brotherhood. Oh, thy world is weary of its pain, of selfish greed and fruitless gain, of tarnished honour falsely strong, and all its ancient deeds of wrong. Oh, hear thou the prayers thy servants pray, uprising from all lands this day, and o'er the vanquished power of sin, bring thy great salvation. Oh Lord, we think of the situation in Afghanistan at this time, and we ask that you help bring some sort of order and peace, and that you help those that are being persecuted in your name, Lord, and that you bring them safely back to their families, wherever they may be. Lord, we thank you for this opportunity to gather once more, even although it is remotely, to discuss and decide and see the best way forward for the various items that we are discussing here today. Thank you for those that have facilitated this meeting, and we thank you for all our staff, every single one, Lord. And we ask that you be with them and that you help them to face up to difficult, stressful decisions they have to make sometimes. We also think of those that are leaving your service at this time, Lord, and as they go on life's journey, that you be with them wherever that journey brings them. We thank you for all that they have done for us during their time here. Lord, comfort those in need of comforting. And there are so many, Lord. Oh, uplift them through these difficult, dark days and help them. And lift them up by reminding them of happier days gone by when things were brighter then. Oh, be close to those in need of medical attention at this time as well, be it mental or physical. Oh, help them back to good health, Lord, so they can continue to be the wonderful service they've been to their families and friends and colleagues. Oh, Lord, look after our children as well, Lord, and get them to remember their Creator in the days of their youth. Go before us now, Lord, and watch over us every day. Oh, teach us how to love you and to take our sins away. For you are a great God and a loving God and a caring God. And that you will protect us and guide us and keep us. Oh, the Lord shall keep thy soul, he shall preserve thee from all ill. Henceforth thy going out and in, God keep for ever will. Dag alle max do hiach gestiach, kwad I diagna, and amer seo is a haun, so sin a mach gebrach. Nag in pekna, glea agus niachin is gachriast, amen.
Thank you, Mr. McKeever. Can we move on now to the Sedierant, and I'll ask Derek Mackay to read the Sedierant. Mr. Mackay.
Leader.
Yeah.
Balavat say, Edisky, Usha Jace, Colin McMillan.
I'm on the hill.
Marty McNeil,
I'm sure.
John Manford, Donald Manford, Paul Francis Steele,
I'm sure.
Benadryl agus Uistatua, Roddy Mackay,
Comhairle.
Ian M. MacLeod,
I'm sure.
Uishan Robertson. Uishan Robertson. Herrick agus County Justin Loch, our apologies from Grant Fulton. Paul Flanagan,
I'm sure.
John G. Mitchell,
Convener, I think John Mitchell's trying to get in, but he's having problems. I've asked Stephen Ferguson to call him, so I don't know if it's any help.
Skew agus County Coon Loch. I have apologies from Ronald Fraser and Angus Morrison. Skew and Rue, Noddy MacDonald,
I'm sure.
Alistair MacLeod, Alistair MacLeod, Finlay Stewart,
I'm sure.
Sean Jess, Keith Dodson,
Here.
Ray McKenzie,
I'm sure.
Angus McCormick, Charlie Nicholson, Charlie Nicholson, I'm seeing Councillor Nicholson is here, his microphone is off.
We also have John Mitchell now.
Sorry, Mr. Mackay, I'm here. I was on the phone to the doctor. Sorry there.
Yeah.
I had IT issues, convener, but I think they've just been sorted. I'm just back in again. Thank you.
Yeah, that's okay. Carry on, Derek. Thank you.
And strong of the two, Ian M. Macaulay. Neil Mackay.
Convener, apologies for Councillor Ian. Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. Gordon Murray.
I'm sure.
Lochatua, Donald F. Crichton, Johnny McKeever,
And I'm sure.
Colin McLean. Tuh Shear agus Nish, John Mackay,
And I'm sure.
John Norman MacLeod, I have apologies from Kenneth MacLeod, Kenny John MacLeod,
I'm sure.
uh, 21 members.
Okay, so 21 members present, and there may be people joining later on if they're having connectivity issues, and we'll take note of that. With regard to the conduct of the meeting, and I think we're all very well versed in that, but I'd like to remind you of the following points. Please ensure your camera and microphone are off. If you're not speaking, I will call on the relevant officer to present their report. And if a member or officer wishes to ask a question or raise a point, please do so using the raise your hand function on your device. I will invite each member in the queue to speak, and at that point, please switch your microphone and camera on. After you have spoken, please ensure that you lower your hand and put your microphone and camera on. Your device should be positioned so that your image is clear to the other participants, and please speak clearly and concisely directly at the camera. When calling for agreement of the recommendations at each item, a no show of hands will be taken as an indication of the Comhairle's approval. With regard to declarations of interest, members are reminded of the protocol. You must leave the meeting by ending the call, which will be confirmed by the moderator to the chair, and following consideration of the item, you will be invited back into the meeting by the moderator. Please ensure that you are available to accept the invite to rejoin. I'm seeing Councillor Ray McKenzie with his hand up.
Sorry, I must have pressed the wrong button. Okay.
That's okay. Thanks for that. Can we move on to the agenda and the minute of the meeting of the 23rd of June 2021 is for approval. Take it that's agreed. And number 2, declarations of interest. You are invited to declare an interest in the agenda item at this point. If you become aware of an interest during the meeting, then I would ask that you declare it at that time. When declaring an interest, it would be helpful if members could indicate briefly the nature of that interest. This helps to make our decision making more open and transparent for the public. Not seeing any hands. So we'll move on then to the draft corporate strategy 2022 to 27. And this is a report by the Chief Executive, and the report provides details of a draft corporate strategy for 2022 to 27. The corporate strategy, which the Comhairle agreed in August 2020 to assist with post-COVID recovery, is due to be refreshed to coincide with the Comhairle's business planning process. The refresh must be completed by November 2021 to support the new business plans, which will be presented alongside the budget in February 2022. The actions required to deliver the strategic outcomes are not specified in the corporate strategy. These actions and other details of delivery will be in the business plans, other strategies, policies and procedures. And I'll ask Chief Executive Malcolm Burr to answer any questions following his presentation. And there are recommendations for approval at paragraph 3.1 of the report. Mr. Burr.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you to those members who've already replied to me, indicating their happiness with the draft strategy. A few words of background. We agreed a revised corporate strategy in August 2020 at the height of the COVID pandemic, but also as we saw signs of recovery and renewal were talked about, as well as resilience and response. And it was right that our corporate strategy was adjusted to take account of the COVID issues. Now that we are in what is hopefully a less COVID-dominated environment, it's right as we move to the final budget of this council in February, and also taking account of the Scottish Parliament election in May and the UK Parliament election last year, the year before, that we revise our corporate strategy accordingly, so that we are not just dominated by COVID. We would have refreshed it mid-term. That would have been 2020 anyway. It was refreshed on account of COVID. It's right now that we refresh it in the light of these events, and so that we are not entering our next budget strategy period wholly dominated by COVID issues. So that's the background, and I wouldn't reiterate what's set out there in paragraph 5, but I will emphasise the points made at 5.2 and 5.3. There are other factors, of course, around Brexit is one of them, and the elections to Westminster and Holyrood are the other two. Why do we have to take account of these particularly? You might say this is our strategy, and that would be right, but with around 90% of our funding coming through government sources, while I would never say that their priorities are our priorities, because that wouldn't be correct, but we have to take account of their priorities. And Scottish Government has set out its commitments, and you've all seen these. These have been revamped in the light of the draft cooperation agreement between Scottish Government and the Scottish Green Party. There will be a programme for government coming along very shortly. So we have to take account of these. Many of these, of course, particularly on economic development, sustainability, net zero, are already aligned with our policies anyway, but we have to adjust these to take account of the election. And that's why any strategy is for 3 or 4 years. That's why it's 2022 to 2027. But to be very clear, the corporate strategy sets the strategic priorities and strategy of the Comhairle. There will be an election next May. I see we have an amendment on that. And just to reassure members, as I have said in the conclusion of this report, it is, of course, for any new council to adopt, adapt, throw in the bin, revise, or indeed replace completely the corporate strategy. That is the first duty of the council once the office bearers are in place, and once the administrative duties following the election have been done, and once the political strategy of the Comhairle is set. So in September or November of next year, the members elected in May will be asked to look at capital programme, revenue budgets, budget strategy, and of course corporate strategy. For the avoidance of any doubt procedurally, the election would be a material change of circumstances, so any strategy we approve in September, you would not be bound by the usual standing order rule about reconsideration within a year, because the election is obviously a material change of circumstances. So I hope that's reassuring. The context is set out in paragraph 6, and I won't read it to you, but in essence we are suggesting, not surprisingly, that our strategy be focused around the economy, children, families and young people, resilient communities, and of course as a council ourselves being a sustainable and inclusive council. Over it all is our strategy of population retention and growth. The reason I'm not asking you to approve this today, although if you would like to approve it in principle, as some of you have indicated, that would be very welcome, but it is not quite yet in the finalised state. There needs to be more emphasis on Gaelic. There needs to be more emphasis on, I think, what we'll call elderly living, whether that's at home or in care or in a care setting. We need to say a bit more, I think, about digitalisation. And we probably need to say a bit more about community wealth building once we know what the programme for government is going to be saying on that subject. Community wealth building, as you know, is Scottish Government's new theme for what I think it used to be called sustainable economic growth. So much of it are things we already do, but there are new rules, hopefully, on procurement, on use of local products. All of that, of course, it becomes more and more necessary for other reasons. So we want to add a bit more on that. And critically, housing, before the draft was written, before the large award of funding from Scottish Government on housing, and we all know we have policy ambitions on housing that go beyond what is within the Scottish Government scheme. So there's a bit of work to be done on that. In terms of process, the document is out to internal consultation just now. I would propose, if you agree, to circulate the document to community planning partners. We will also invite comments from members of the public and community organisations through the area fora where these exist, and through the community conversation network where they don't. So we'll ask for comments as quickly as possible on that. And I'm hoping to take the finalised strategy back to Policy and Resources Committee and Council on the 29th of September. So for those who think this is premature, why are we doing a corporate strategy at the end of a term? Well, because we did a mid-term review at the height of COVID. It is right that we review. It is right that we review in the light of government priorities as well, and we need a corporate strategy now to prepare us for the final budget of the Comhairle and for the immediate term ahead. It will be for the new council, the newly elected council, as I've said, to review its corporate strategy, but that isn't done the moment members are elected and government, of course, has to go on. I'll leave it there. Convener, happy to take questions.
Okay, thanks so much for that, Mr. Barr. I'm seeing Councillor Roddy Mackay, Council Leader Mackay.
Yeah, thanks for that. Just to say, Thank you very much for that presentation, Malcolm. I think there's no doubt at all about it that we agreed to refresh mid-term, and of course we postponed it because of COVID, and we had some COVID emphasis. But now we have to, if we're going to be responsible and sensible members, we have to plan ahead and we have to tweak it. I think you're going out to consultation. It's a good idea. I think there's plenty of time. Come back in September to PNR and Council, because the vast majority of what's in this corporate strategy, of course, is what's been in it since day one of this Council. And we're tweaking and refining as we go along, reflecting changing circumstances and, of course, reflecting government initiatives. So thank you for the document. I think it's very welcome. It's pretty comprehensive. I don't think it should surprise anybody. I do note that there's some suggestion that that the amendment, the wording of the amendment, that the democratic process is fully respected. Well, actually, we would be abandoning our democratic duty if we didn't do this as responsible members. We want to leave this Council at the end of this term in a place where it's got a good corporate strategy, a good business planning regime, and an effective budget. And that's our duty as members. And as you've quite clearly said, that any new council can do whatever they wish going forward, but it would be irresponsible for us to leave it in a chaotic position where they hadn't got an up-to-date, relevant and useful corporate strategy to pursue. So I hope in the light of your presentation that those proposing the amendment can see that the issues they raised are actually addressed within the process going forward. And there's no reason whatsoever for not bashing on with this at the minute as you propose. So thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Charlie Nicholson's hand up, and followed by Councillor Cal Macmillan.
Thank you, Convener, and the leader picked up a few of the points on that. Just a point in regards to Chief Executive, the management structure as such. What's your comment in relation to that? Do you want that picked up just now, or when are we going to pick up the aspect of getting clarification on the proposed management structure, which will be joined into the corporate strategy?
Can I just check that? Are you talking about the management of staff, or are you talking about a completely different thing, which is changing the management structure of the Comhairle as it's been?
Convener, perhaps I can assist. Perhaps Mr. Nicholson is referring to the references within the next item to the corporate strategy and the links between the corporate strategy and the proposed management structure, and I can address these in the next report. Or now, if that's preferred.
You okay with that, Mr. Nicholson?
Thank you, Convener. That's fine. I was just making sure that we would have a little discussion on that. In principle, the strategy before us, as the leaders indicated, is a very good way of going forward and safeguarding the new council when it comes in as well.
I think that's right, and I think it is appropriate that, well, we've got to take that item in private for very obvious reasons in terms of the staffing aspect of it, if not other areas as well. Councillor Cal Macmillan, seeing your hand up.
Thank you, Convener. Can you hear me there?
Yes, yeah, carry on.
Thank you. I hesitate to say this out loud, but I agree with the leader in that corporate strategy must be continually reviewed, and I would have to thank the chief executive for all the work that was done here. Unsurprisingly, I would have to say that I haven't seen the amendment because I don't have email at the moment, which has probably spared you all some comment. The one thing that I do not see here is we were looking previously at some sort of model, perhaps based on or even extrapolated from the Faroese model, where we had a more devolved system and even an area committee, so that particularly in the Southern Isles here, we could have a look at things differently or similarly, but with a different vein. I'm reminded, as I said to the chairman of HHP, or sorry, apologies, the late chairman of HHP, that when you share the space with an elephant, it's all fine and good provided the elephant behaves. But when the elephant doesn't, then you have to leave the space. And the housing issue that we have here, where all of the housing from the various millions has been concentrated around Stornoway and its environs, is a particularly manifest example of the problems that we have. I'm not comparing to an elephant at all, convener. It just occurred to me, or anyone else. It's just the analogy that we have to be mindful of sharing stuff out. And when I compare the speed and alacrity with which the care facilities in Stornoway have been progressed, and in comparison to the facility in Barra, it's almost as though there's a design to fail aspect involved, and I hope it's not. But time will tell, and that will probably be beyond the remit and term of this particular corridor. But in terms of page 5, we have the SWOT analysis, the weaknesses and opportunity. Area committees could be part of that. I'm not sure if the chief executive could include that for consideration by the next corridor, but it's certainly one of the things we have to look at. And the other part that we must look and consider is, how do we facilitate business? Because the economic viability of these islands is what's there, and we have to change from economic constraint to economic facilitativeness, and that we are welcoming businesses in, because it's only businesses that attract young people, working wage people, and benefit the economy. And one of our main or principal focus is delivering the Islands Bill projects. Now, when it comes to UIST, the Islands Bill is very thin on the ground. Spaceport aside, but that is all pretty much private money, apart from the purchase price that the council paid for the land. But certainly the delivery of the Islands Bill is very much a Stornoway-based deal. All of it hopefully will have rollout, but certainly at the moment it's very much Stornoway-based. And the housing we have to look at incorporating as a strategy, that we provide housing in the areas from which Stornoway is remote. And that's something that we have to look at along with the area committees. And I would hope that these sorts of things are included in the thing as we see it in September. Thank you, convener.
Okay, thanks very much for that. I'll ask the Chief Executive to come in, and then Councillor Roddy Mackay to come in. But the reality is, what we're looking at just now is creating a framework between now and the next election that will keep momentum within the Comhairle and with organisations out with the Comhairle, and to make sure that that the handover that takes place in May is one that can be adapted to meet the demands of the new Comhairle when it comes in. So I think it's really important to do that. But I'll bring the Chief Executive in. Chief Executive.
Thank you, convener. I won't comment on the Barra project because Policy and Resources Committee and Council will receive a full report on that project at the next series. But the points Councillor McMillan makes on housing and on community empowerment and public service reform are well made. They're there in the strategy, but they are two areas I want to give greater emphasis to. And housing, I think I mentioned in my presentation, we weren't in receipt of the sum we've received from Scottish Government. Discussions have already taken place on what the Comhairle wants to see from that sum, and I know there are many in this chamber who will support the bias of the previous strategy towards build in the rural areas, and we will take our policy stance on that. I'm sure at the September series, if not shortly thereafter. But housing and public service reform are key to our strategy, but there are two things on the horizon. One is the consultation on National Care Service, which could make, if it doesn't go well, in my opinion, and that's a personal opinion, it could make the biggest unintended consequence change to local government and local governance of anything we have seen in 30 years. That's not to talk about its merits on other points. We'll consider that at a seminar and at the next series of meetings. But that's a huge factor on public service reform at the moment. And housing, as I've said, we have a generous allocation. We want to use it in a way that benefits areas which we and we alone identify, and it may be that we have to be more directive as to how that funding is spent. I'll leave it there, but just to say these are points that will feature in the second version of the strategy.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Barr. Councillor Roddy Mackay, Council Leader.
Yeah, just to respond to a couple of points that have been raised there. In terms of housing, there is still an intentional desire and a commitment to try and disperse housing throughout the islands. It hasn't proved easy, but the commitment is still there. And I have to pay tribute to Ian Archie McNeil and the colleagues on the UBIC group who are trying their best to put in place structures to facilitate house building, particularly in Euston Barra. So that commitment's still there. I don't think the corporate strategy in front of us today will do anything other than reinforce that commitment. And we are also, just by way of information, because I don't want this to be taken up with housing, we've already had several courses of action since we heard about the announcement on funding. We've met with contractors, including contractors from Euston Barra, and we've met with HHP, and we are awaiting a meeting with the Housing Minister, where we are going to put to them our proposals for more flexibility in terms of spend, and hopefully that will facilitate quicker and more responsive actions in Euston around housing in Euston Barra. So, and the only other thing is, Councillor Macmillan was referring, I think he meant to refer to the Islands Deal rather than the Islands Bill. And in the Islands Deal, there are a range of projects covering the entire archipelago of the islands. And it should be said that the work we're doing in Barra and Battersea, which we have been attempting, has been a really ambitious project there. The per capita spend there was huge, and it's still a challenge for us, but it's still to come before us in the next couple of series. So we are active, and this strategy, just to reinforce that fact, this strategy will continue to put emphasis on these issues. And that's why I think the Chief Executive wants to go away and just tweak it a little bit more before it comes back in its final form. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mackay. I'm seeing Kenny John MacLeod and Colin McMillan. Is that a legacy hand you have up there, Councillor McMillan?
No, convener. I was going to try and come back on something else, or something that I hadn't covered, which I would like to be included as well. But if Councillor Kenny John can speak first, thank you.
Councillor MacLeod.
Yeah, thank you very much, convener. Can I first of all welcome the refresh of the corporate strategy, and as a first cut, it is I think exactly what we're needing to have developed at this stage. Of course, we cannot have a policy vacuum that we pass on to the next scholar. So I think it is important that it's done now, and it is consistent with what we've always set out as our policy priorities. I would take exception to what my good friend Councillor Colin McMillan just said, that the concentration on Stornoway. We have gone to all sorts of measures to try and promote and encourage the development of housing and the release of land throughout our islands. I've written to many grazing committees twice over the term of this Comhairle, attended local meetings, and as the leader has said, in fact he very much said what I was going to say, so I'll not just repeat that. But I think it is right that we do refresh the corporate strategy at this time, and we not allow a policy vacuum. Of course, there are all sorts of things that we'll need to respond to once the programme from government is clarified by the Scottish Government, and we will in due course respond to it. I think there is good and sufficient time for the community and various bodies to respond to the draft that's been proposed. So I think the process is right. And again, what was suggested about representation, it's really more a governance matter than a strategy matter. But I think governance has to go alongside the review of our processes. So thank you for that.
Okay, thanks for that, Councillor MacLeod. And there is no doubt that reluctantly as a council we accepted the skewing of the finance going into the GoTill project, but again that was for good reason, and I think there's every expectation that the focus will then be on providing housing right across the islands and finding different ways, as the council leader said, of creating that housing demand in the first place, but also the completion of that would allow younger people to engage in having their own house before they reach the age of 70. You know, so I think it's really important that we focus very much on the strategy going forward. And again, that should be part of the framework that we have between now and next June when the new council takes place. Councillor Macmillan, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Convener. It's about the partner agencies that we have, and I couldn't see a mention of it here, particularly police and a health board. You probably have heard me long enough going on about the Police Scotland's catch and release programme. I found out from the Chief Inspector why it was done like that, and it's because the Group 4 contract with the Scottish Government only allows them to collect customers from Stornoway, so that is the only place that collections are made for transfer onwards. I was never disputing the fact that people were taken away for bed and breakfast or for short holidays. My concern was that they were never returned back to a place of safety close to their homes, or a place of safety that was within their normal distance. Now, that's the sort of thing where we as a council can make representation to the Scottish Government Justice Department, because I got nowhere there and they said that's just the way it is. But it turns out that that's the way that they had scoped the contract with Group 4. Now, that goes back to what I was saying about the space that we inhabit here. It's not just Stornoway as the capital area. There is a lot of area out with that where you are sometimes 2 ferry journeys and a long way from Stornoway, but even further from Dingwall, Inverness or Glasgow when you get released. And the Scottish Government took no cognizance of that in the scoping of the contract with Group 4. So I'm not sure how we could look at that in terms of our partner agencies in the strategy that we're looking at, but it's certainly something that we could highlight as part of our strategy, and if that could be included or even considered, I'd be very grateful. Thank you, Convener.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor McCormack.
Thank you very much, Convener. I fully accept the need for this corporate strategy to go through this meeting today. There is no way that we should be handing over to a new council a situation which has not been determined in advance for them to work with. You will recall at the beginning of this council that we had, I think it was 15 new members. That's 15 people who really didn't have much knowledge of how the council works and operates. And so it was important for them to have time to bed themselves in and understand. the different procedures and then come up with their own corporate strategy. And that is the correct way to go about things. That is the sensible way to go about things. That is the way which offers the most resilient procedures in terms of going forward. That is what I would say on that regard. I think myself that the wording of the present corporate strategy that's before us today is absolutely fine. I can see that there may be a need for a tweak here and there, right enough, but generally speaking, it's a good corporate strategy. It's not intended to define exactly everything that we're going to do or anything like that, but it's offering the new council a good way forward. In regard to Councillor McMillan's remarks with regard to care homes and facilities and such like, I can assure him that I first started talking about care homes in 2003 when I was first elected to this council. And at the same time, in the following council, when I was a member of the Western Isles Health Board, I became part of, in fact, I chaired a group of individuals who were taken from the staff in this organisation and the Health Board to scope out the future of St Brendan's and the care home in Barra. At that time, I would have to say the care home in Barra was significantly underutilised. There was plenty of space and it was in very good condition, as I recall. So it was an idea of looking towards the future. Now, the Stornoway developments have progressed more resolutely than have Barra, and that has always been a concern to me, and I have, during this term, been very supportive of recently retired Director of Education in his efforts to get the Barra project forward. It was always going to be an extremely difficult project. There are all sorts of constraints around the project, and the fact that it moved forward in the way that it did, I think, was absolutely commendable, and it was bound to take a long time. And in both the Stornoway case and the Barra case, it was the involvement of the Scottish Government that was absolutely crucial to things actually happening at the end of the day. And it just so happened that the issues, the negative issues, if you like, regarding Stornoway were more easily overcome than the negative issues surrounding the project in Barra. But that doesn't mean that this council did not give every effort to progressing both of these projects. The point that the Chief Executive makes about the future of care is something I'm particularly concerned about myself. I agree that there should be a national care service. I am very concerned that it should become a national care service run as the National Health Services at the moment from Edinburgh. It is absolutely essential in my view that local services should be run locally. We are in a far better position to run our services than people who are in Edinburgh who don't know what on earth is going on here at all. And a blanket allocation of direction to all different areas of Scotland just does not work, and that has been demonstrated over and over again. And I have myself already stated my belief that because COVID has been allocated very much to local government, or rather to the local Western Isles Health Board, that has allowed them to be extremely responsive in dealing with COVID. Once, of course, we got over the whole business of block beds, which was not a very good exercise at all. So just to say, Convener, I very much support the corporate strategy, and I'd like to make sure that we take a decision today.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McCormack. I'm not seeing any other hands up at the moment.
If the meeting's at the stage of moving to recommendations, I should actually correct something in 3.1b in the last line, which is following that's when it says following a period of internal consultation, that really should be internal and external, as I've said.
Okay. So the recommendations are there for approval at paragraph 3.1 with that slight change that the Chief Executive has just introduced. Are we happy with that?
Agreed.
Councillor Gordon-Murray?
Thank you, Convener. I've put in an amendment. So shall I read out the amendment for the benefit of members, please?
You can do, but it's pretty much what's in the current strategy between now and next summer, but you can carry on and do that.
Well, I'm putting forward an amendment for debate. And it's been accepted, and I've got a seconder, so.
Been accepted by whom?
Well, I assume it hasn't come back, so I'm putting it forward as an amendment.
You just carry on then.
Right, thank you. The amendment is that the council, wishing to ensure that the democratic process is fully respected, agrees to defer final consideration of the corporate strategy 2022 to 2027 until June 2022, so as to allow for a full consultation with affected stakeholders and communities across the Western Isles in order to allow the newly elected members to consider the corporate strategy, particularly in the areas of renewable energy. Thanks.
Seconded by?
Me, John Mitchell.
John Mitchell. Okay. Council Leader?
Yeah, thanks for that. I think every contribution to the debate so far has been to explain why this is unnecessary. But if the amendment is to be has been proposed by Councillor Murray and seconded by Mitchell, can I propose that we go straight to the vote?
In terms of the recommendations for approval.
Convener, everyone has spoken. I have to present this and put our case forward. So I think it's unfair if we go straight to vote.
No, I mean, if you hadn't interrupted me, what I was saying is that I propose that the recommendations for approval at paragraph 3.1 be adopted. Do I have a seconder?
I'm happy to second that.
Councillor McCormack has agreed to accept that.
Just for clarification, Convener, that includes the Chief Executive's wording, internal and external.
Absolutely, yeah, as noted. Okay, if anybody wants to go to debate on that, perfectly happy for that to take place.
Convener, sorry, is it not the case that whoever's proposing the original motion has to speak, and then the proposer of the amendment speaks, and then the seconder? Are we still keeping to that convention?
That is the convention. I propose that the recommendations presented to us at paragraph 3.1 of the report be accepted, and that was seconded by Councillor Angus McCormack.
So you're to speak on it now, are you not, Convener?
That's all I need to say. In terms of the proposal that's been put forward to us in the report at item 3, I'm moving that the recommendations are accepted.
Okay, so are you waiving your right to speak to it, and is it not my turn now to speak to the amendment?
Absolutely.
Okay. Am I able to speak to the amendment now then?
Yes.
We can. Thank you. Okay, I've just seen basically, thanks very much for the presentation, and also thanks to all the officers that have worked on this corporate strategy. The corporate strategy or manifesto is hugely important and gives political direction for the next 5 years, 2022 to 2027, and sets out the aspirations very clearly. However, no matter how good it is or how we feel about it, the manifesto should be part of the election process. And as candidates present themselves at doorsteps, speaking to their constituents and expressing their pledges and aspirations, this should be where the manifesto process starts, with our people, with our communities. Political groups will write manifestos, as we did, and put it to the people, and if successfully elected, will implement these policies. This is basic democracy, and what we have here is not democracy. From what I understand, no elected member had any direct input into this manifesto. It had been presented to the Chairs group and to the SNP group, which we requested for prior to today. And from what I've been told, that's all. If passed today or approved, the process will continue, and the newly elected councillors will be bound to a manifesto that they did not agree to and that people did not vote on, and which has been put together on bureaucratic principles and not democratic principles. Our people pay their council tax, and they should, like every other part of the country, exercise their democratic right at election time to choose councillors on a manifesto that best represents their values. Can you imagine if this happened in national government? Let's treat our electorate with respect and not contempt, and allow the new council, whoever they may be, to chart the direction of travel politically for this local authority. Otherwise, we'll be shortchanging our electorate. So I urge you to vote for the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. I'll invite Councillor McCormack.
Thank you very much, convener. I would have to say that I just fundamentally disagree with Councillor Gordon Murray. I think he's talking a lot of nonsense. The majority of councillors in the last round who stood for this council may well never have ever read the draft corporate strategy document, which doesn't mean they cannot stand on their own personal agenda, which is what most people in this council do. It's only the SNP that stand on their own sort of manifesto type thing. And basically, the SNP have spent most of this council trying to undermine the corporate strategy that was agreed by the council, which I don't think is a very responsible way of dealing with the council's proposals for the future, which were agreed by the council. I just don't think that the points made by Councillor Gordon Murray hold any water at all. Somebody who wishes to stand for the council does not need to have the type of manifesto that he's talking about unless he's part of a political party. Political parties are not all that popular in terms of council in this particular area, and people are absolutely entitled to stand on their own wishes and on their own perceptions of what the people in their particular area desire. That is what they stand upon. And if elected, they then discuss with their colleagues a corporate strategy to take forward. They must have something to go on when they enter the council in the first place. You cannot all of a sudden, a week after you've been in council, we don't even know how it works, come up with a new corporate strategy. That's quite absurd. You have to have something you can work with until such time as you have further understanding of how the council works and a further understanding of what you believe the community desires. I don't think this council can be called a bad scholar for its involvement of people. We are very, very good at involving people. We are all of us, and I will include the SNP in this, we are all of us good at talking to our community groups and finding out from our communities just exactly what their feelings are on different issues. And we bring them back, and it is all of these considerations that help us eventually to come up with a corporate strategy for the future. And that is how we should do things.
Okay. Thanks very much for that, Councillor McCormack. Councillor John Mitchell.
Thank you, Convener. My support for Councillor Murray is very much to do with the feeling that this corporate strategy 2022 to 2027 had a degree of permanence about it, and it just seemed to be the wrong timing. Now, I'm somewhat reassured by the leader who says that that can be constantly tweaked, and I'm also somewhat reassured by Mr. Burke when he says that that can be debated, flung out and reviewed and so on. But my concern is that obviously the corporate strategy is inextricably entwined with the management restructuring. And my concern is that when we're 90% into the term of this council, yes, I mean, I think Councillor McCormack, not for the first time, has got the wrong end of the stick here. I mean, he talks about SNP undermining the corporate strategy. Now, surely stifling any debate, which is what we always try to do in the chamber, is going to do more to undermine any democratic process than anything else. But that aside, let's go back to the main structure. My main reason for the support was my concern, and I'm sure it must be the concern of many councillors, I would have thought, that this link between corporate strategy and management restructuring, when the new council comes, there will be, what, 10% retiring, 10 to 15%, including maybe myself, not getting back in, etc., etc. We could see, perhaps as we did the last time, about a third of new members. Yeah, of course, there's no talk about flinging out the whole corporate strategy. The corporate strategy, I don't understand the full protocol of the requirements of, but I do appreciate that such a thing has to be in place for things like budgets and so on. But my concern is if we make any sort of judgments on management restructuring, they're not as simple to address and tweak and reverse on debate in the chamber from a new council in May. And that is my main concern. And I just wonder if we don't carry the two of them forward, because any corporate strategy will have, maybe Mr. Barr will correct me in this matter because he knows more on governance than I do, of course, but I would have thought that corporate strategy and management restructuring perhaps doesn't always go hand in hand, but there's a link where one will necessarily involve changes in the other. And that's the reason for my support. I just feel that even if Convener, Mr. Barr, even if we've been called an interim corporate strategy, I would have felt just slightly less uneasy than constantly being reminded this is 2022 to 2027, when there is only 10% of the term left. And that's the reason for my seconding it. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for that. I'm now opening it out to any other member who wishes to speak. Councillor McMillan. Councillor McMillan.
Thank you, Convener. I would have to correct Councillor McCormack, and I would have to thank him for his contribution, but it shows us the difficulty that we have. And one of these is that the SNP are not undermining the corporate strategy, but when it comes to amendments being put forward, that is how we define policy and any changes in policy that we see. There is a disconnect here between amendments and undermining. Now, to consider that amendments to items are undermining the policy is to misrepresent what an amendment is. An amendment is our opportunity to change the policy as we see it and as it's put forward. And what I would put here, and I would recommend that this be taken on board by those who change the standing orders, is that the standing orders, rather than immediately electing office bearers, that new councillors are given a chance to be educated on where we're going and what the strategy is and what the policies are, so that they can put these things into place. It is no point saying that half the councillors that came in didn't know what was going on and that their job, their main purpose was policy making. But in terms of policy making, the effort that has gone into preventing amendments from being put forward and any changes from happening is immense. And as Councillor McCormick says, they should do as they're told. And admittedly, I say that councillors are like the primary force and that we're allowed to go to the toilet and come back and we're expected to be done up and proper. But in reality, we are the policymakers. It's not a Politburo. We are expected to put amendments forward rather than rubber stamp what gets put in front of us. And in the changes that I would hope that are adopted to the standing orders, that any meeting of councillors, if there is a plenary or diet, that we can discuss and put forward without the formal structures of where we want to see that going. And as I've said before, what we have to do is be facilitative to the economy. And that has to be the core structure and plank of what we take forward. But certainly we have to allow new councillors who come in the opportunity of consideration of policy. And if that means a bit of time spent in teaching or allowing people to learn, then that is something that has to be built into the standing orders that are changed prior to the end of this term. So I would say that, and hopefully that's taken on board. But then again, we always try and define the future, and we try and define the future as we currently see it. But continuous change is what we have to allow. And on that note, I shall thank the convener for my opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McMillan. I'm seeing Councillor Gordon Murray's hand up. Councillor Gordon Murray.
Sorry, convener, I just left it up. Just allow any members to come in if they want. I'll come in at the appropriate time. Sorry.
If you could take your hand down, it would help quite a bit. Thank you. Councillor Paul Steele. Paul Finnegan, sorry. I couldn't see the second part to it. Apologies, Paul.
Thanks, Chair. I'm listening to the arguments. I can hear both sides of the argument here, and I'm wondering, is it a possibility of putting something in that after a year of the new council, that there's a review put in place that the actual corporate strategy is reviewed. So you take the corporate strategy forward as it goes, and then but once councillors have had a chance to find their feet and settle in, that they have a chance then to look at it and put something in formally that says, well, after a year or 18 months, we would then maybe look at reviewing it and see what needs to be done or changed.
Thanks very much for that, Councillor Finnegan. Councillor Mackay, Councillor Leader.
Yeah, I think the debate at the minute is about whether we agree this document and it comes back in September, or we do not take responsibility for doing it and put it off till the next term. And I think that's what the debate about it. And I think it's straying into areas that really have nothing to do with what's in front of us. What Councillor Finnegan has said actually is the case anyway, and I'm sure the Chief Executive has said that in his presentation. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's 6 months, a year, or 18 months. That corporate strategy, we have a duty every council has a duty in council to review it and update it. So that will happen anyway, just to reassure Councillor Finnegan. So I think all the concerns that have been raised so far have been are addressed within what's in front of us, and so I think we should just crack on with that. So that's my view on the matter.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm not seeing any other hands up at the moment. Councillor Charlie Nicholson.
Thank you, convener, and listening to the debate. I would totally agree with what the council leader said there. Corporate strategy, it's important, and it's important to the basis of the work that Mr. Burr and his colleagues has taken on board, and what's presented today is a good step forward. Like any council, and especially independent councillors, I feel it's like a kind of kickstart of a campaign for the next council, what has kind of been put forward here today. People are allowed to stand as independents. We shouldn't be into the kind of politicising of taking things forward in the way for the next council. Leave it to those that wish to stand and the groups that wish to stand as such. We have the opportunity, and the next new councillors, whoever they are, he or she, have the opportunity of tweaking the corporate strategy, putting forward proposals, change to it, etc. This is a good corporate strategy as a starting point, and it takes in a lot of the stuff that we've been working on over the last number of years in regards to partners and that. And as Mr. Burr indicated in his presentation, the aspect of going back out to partners and taking things on board. This isn't a final, complete, can never be changed in any way at all. It's a strategy that can be tweaked, taken forward, convener, and engaged with any community group within the Western Isles in years to come, like we've done over the last number of years of tweaking, changing, engaging and debating change for the best within our communities. Thank you, convener.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. Ray Mackenzie.
Thanks, convener. Yeah, I mean, I generally agree with. First of all, thanks for the report from the chief executive, and I generally agree, and I think probably we all agree. I think the leader has made a good point that. You know, it's come down to a matter of should we set it before or should we set it after the election or whatever. There is always the possibility that the majority of the council might be new members, and it would be handy for them to have you know, some sort of template laid down in advance. You know, quite honestly, I don't feel too strongly about this. As long as the new council have the opportunity of, and it has been said that they have the opportunity at any time to reintroduce a new corporate strategy or tweak it or whatever you want to call it. You know, I think if that safeguard is there, yeah, I would probably be happy with that. I do. There was one point which the chief executive mentioned, and that we should remember that it is for consultation externally as well. You know, I think that's just a technical point added to that recommendation. So I am, you know, I must admit that I agreed with the amendment, but having heard the debate just now, I don't agree with what Mr. McCormick was said. Having said that, I think that he's just playing games, quite frankly. But anyway, I do feel that I'm persuaded to go along with the motion because of mainly the point that the new council can or will have the ability to change the corporate strategy if they so please, and that'll be up to them. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much, Councillor Mackenzie. Any other hands up? Not seeing any other hands up. So we'll turn to the summing up then, and I'll ask Councillor Gordon Murray to sum up.
Thanks, convener. I just basically I want to say again, I think it's anti-democratic to bind a newly elected council to an old manifesto. Just imagine if a Tory administration did this, an outgoing Tory administration did this and set a manifesto, and a incoming Labour administration wouldn't be able to change it for another year, 18 months. That's what you're suggesting. I've never heard of this in my life. We get the newly elected councillors to form their own political manifestos by working together, speaking to the people. As for Councillor McCormack, I think his understanding about local democracy is completely bizarre. He just doesn't get it. And I have to say, Councillor McCormack, the people are sovereign, not you. So if you wish to go with the motion and go with Councillor McCormack's argument, vote for the motion. But I'm urging you to vote for this amendment and protect our democracy and our people's right to choose their own political direction. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Murray. I'll sum up in terms of the recommendation, and just in terms of the recommendation and what your seconder, Councillor John Mitchell, said. In the body of the report, it provides details of a draft corporate strategy for 22-26. That is making it very clear that that strategy is there, and that strategy will be there for 5 years, and the strategy will change. Undoubtedly, it'll change as time moves on, and that's the opportunity that we, as a council, should be providing for any new council member who comes in at the election. They will have the opportunity to do that, and I think it's really important that we recognise that that's the case. I do have to say, for Councillor Murray, that there is a big difference between a manifesto and a strategy, and a corporate strategy at that. That gives the opportunity for anybody to plug in, to put their tuppence worth in, and to take things that they wish to see going forward, coming forward. That is very different to a manifesto. A manifesto is very much a political instrument that is used by different parties in different ways, hoping that they will get the majority when it comes to election time. So I just wanted to clarify these 2 points. And what is in the report is very clear, with the slight amendment that the Chief Executive made. That is the best option for us going forward, pretty much as of now, in terms of preparing for the new term of the council and the 5 years that follow from that. That is very much enshrined in the recommendation that has been put before us, and I think I'll just finish at that. Okay, I think we now turn to the vote, and for those who are in favour, will say motion, and those who are not in favour of the recommendation, they will vote for the amendment. Councillor, sorry, not Councillor, it's Derek Mackay. The other Councillor Mackay, I saw his photo a wee while ago. So Derek, on you go.
Convener.
Motion.
Leader.
Motion.
Colin McMillan.
Amendment.
Ian Archie McNeil.
Amendment.
Don Manford isn't the meeting. Paul Steele.
Motion.
Roddy Mackay.
Motion.
Ian M. MacLeod.
Motion.
Ushon Robertson.
He's present.
I thought he was present. Paul Finnegan.
Motion.
John G. Mitchell.
Amendment.
Nolly MacDonald. Sorry, I've got apologies from Grant Bolton.
Yeah.
Sorry, Nolly MacDonald, Scaring Room.
See there?
Nolly MacDonald, Scaring Room. I must have left the meeting. Finlay Stewart.
Motion.
Keith Johnson.
Motion.
Ray Mackenzie.
Motion.
Angus McCormack. Motion. Charlie Nicholson.
Motion.
Apologies from Councillor Macaulay. Neil Mackay.
Motion.
Gordon Murray.
Amendment.
Donald Crichton. Motion. Johnny McKeever.
Amendment.
Colin McLean isn't
Isn't present.
John Mackay.
Motion.
John MacLeod isn't here. Kenneth MacLeod, apologies. Kenny John MacLeod.
Motion.
Uh, 15 for the motion and 5 for the amendment.
So that's 15 for the motion and 5 for the amendment. We move on now to item 4, and we will have to go into we'll have to go into private in terms of this report, and it.
A couple of seconds.
Yeah, we'll ask Marina just to make sure that we are in private before we start. Take a couple of minutes, folks.
Convener, there is a presentation for members, which will just take a minute to set up.
SharePoint. You go through the SharePoint.
Oh, do I?
Yeah, it won't be up here the screen, just put on the. For a couple of minutes to make sure everything's okay.
Derek, I missed the vote there. I'm sorry, I couldn't get recorded. My apologies. I would have voted for the motion. So
That's okay, Noddy. I mean, that's fine.
Yeah.
Is Charlie? Charlie, do you have your hand up, Councillor Nicholson?
Thank you, Convener. Unfortunately, I have to leave just now, Convener, to go to a doctor's appointment. But I have 4 or 5 questions in regards to the management structure.
you.